Hey guys, sorry this is a little bit late, but this is your unit 1 EQ1 notes, introduction to anatomy and phys, how is the body organized, and once you're done with these notes you can take the quiz which is on Canvas. I'll send an email out to you as well, so hopefully you can get this. So anyway, so we're going to talk about what's the difference between anatomy and physiology. When you talk about anatomy, we're talking about what's parts of the wrench, right? So we have the handle, we have the screw, we have the jaws, we have the fixed part. Sorry, this is the jaw right here and the fixed part. I think these are number and the adjustable part, right? So those three, I guess, would be both of the jaws, and then the fixed part, and then the adjustable part, right? So, and then when we talk about physiology, we're going to talk about what's the function, right? So you hold the wrench here, you adjust the worm screw here to move 5, and then obviously you're going to go ahead and turn the bolt. So that's parts versus function, right? So the anatomy is the parts, physiology the function. So as we go through this class, take notice of how different parts of the body look the way they do, and that's because of their function. We talk a lot about that in biology as well, form fits function, right? So how like a cell is formed determines its function. If you look at a nerve cell or a blood cell, they all look differently because their functions are different. So we need to talk about levels of organization going from smallest to largest, right? So we start off with the atom, and you have a group of atoms. They form a molecule, and you have different types of molecules forming a cell, and then have different cells with a specific function forming a tissue. And tissue of a specific function creates an organ, and then an organ with groups of organs with specific functions fit a system, right? And then a group of organ systems create an organism. Right, so we divide the body into 3 sections. We'll go with number 1, dividing the body into front and back portions, and that's the frontal plane, because it talks about the frontal and the rear. The sagittal would be down the middle, right? So sagittal divides it into right and left. And then the third is the transverse, which divides it up into lower and upper, right? So when you talk about an anatomical position, you can see this individual with his hands are faced out to his side. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking anatomical position. So now we need to concentrate on the cavities of the body, and these will be referred to throughout the course. So the first one is the cranial cavity, holding the brain. The second is not so much a cavity, but it's since it's not part of any of the other cavities, we separate that to itself, and that's the vertebral column or the spinal canal. Then we have the thoracic, containing the heart and the lungs, and then dividing the 2 cavities, we have the diaphragm, which is a muscle that separates your thoracic cavity and your abdominal cavity. And your abdominal cavity contains all your digestive organs, stomach, liver, kidney, intestines, and so on. And then our pelvic cavity contains our reproductive organs. So that is the cavities that you need to memorize. So we're going to talk about 11 organ systems in the body, which is on page 13 in your book. You will need to know the functions of these. I will leave them on the notes here, but I'm going to go through it really fast. I'm not going to concentrate. But remember the whole thing, we're going to talk about homeostasis, and that's the ability to maintain a stable internal environment. So all our 11 organ systems work together to maintain homeostasis of the body so we can survive. All right, so we're going to start with the integumentary systems, mostly the skin. So that's what we refer it to. What its main function is to protect and help regulate body temperature. Our skeletal system provides the framework and protects internal organs. Okay, so integumentary skin, fingernails, hair, and then the bones of the body. Muscular system provides forces to move the body parts of the skeletal system. Other parts too, we have muscular system in our digestive tract as well, so it's not just the skeletal system. Nervous system is for communication of changes inside and outside of the body. Also the coordination of movement. Next, we have the endocrine system. So this is glands and hormones. It regulates our metabolism. This is our system that sends chemicals from one location to another, and fight or flight. I think you've talked about. Have you heard that? That's all based on the endocrine system. The cardiovascular or circulatory system, sometimes it's called that as well, contains of your heart and your blood. So it transports blood throughout your body, carries oxygen to the cells and carbon dioxide away from the cells into the atmosphere. Okay, so there's our endocrine system, made up of a bunch of glands. Cardiovascular system, lymphatic or immune system. This is another term that we can use for lymphatic, is the immune system, transfer fluid back to the bloodstream, and responsible for our immunity. Digestive system, pretty much what it says. It breaks down food into simpler forms that can be absorbed into our bloodstream. So those are those two. And then I think the last few, respiratory system. This is responsible for transporting gases between the blood and the air. And then the urinary system is for excretion of waste from our blood. And we regulate water and salt concentration. So even though we just think of it as excreting waste, it does regulate water and salt concentrations. Alrighty, so, and then the last one is reproductive system, reproduces a new organism. Okay, so that is the 11 systems. And then we'll work on this. You will need to know these as well. And we're talking about, remember, we're talking about anatomical positions. So superior versus inferior, up versus down for the most part, right? The head is superior to the neck, so it is above the neck. Anterior versus posterior, so this is front and back. Let's say that our lungs are anterior to our spine, right? So it's in front of or something. The spine would be posterior. So superficial versus deep. Mostly we're just talking maybe blood vessels, or they are deep compared to our skin. Our blood vessels are super deep in relation to our skin, and superficial would be above it, right? So superficial would be on the skin, the top layers, and then deep would be the lower layers. Proximal versus distal, which closer to farther away. So for instance, if you're talking about our elbow, right? So, or our joint here on our elbow. So you would have your fingers would be distal to your elbows, right? Where the elbow would be proximal to the shoulder, like if you're comparing, right? So distal, farther away, proximal is closer. I don't know if that was a great example. And then medial versus lateral. So medial would be closer to the middle of the body, and then lateral would be away from the body. So after you finish your EQ1 notes, take your notes. Quiz in Canvas, and that is, and I will post these so you may see them, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.